Claire. All right. Good morning, everyone. We are going to begin our second task force meeting on today, November 1st. It is 10:07. My name is Charles Sitnor. I'm one of the co-chairs of this particular task force. Today we have a lineup for everyone from that includes the prosecutorial performance indicators organization, as well as two of the three vendors that were mentioned in our last meeting by State's Attorney Rich Gibson, Judicial Dialogue Systems, as well as the Carpel Solutions. With that, I want to give my co-chair an opportunity to speak, and then thereafter, what we're going to do is allow task force members who were not at our prior meeting to introduce themselves. Thereafter, we'll go directly into our presentations, beginning with the prosecutorial performance indicators.
Thank you, Senator Sidnor. I'm Delegate David Moon, the House co-chair for this task force. We kicked off our opening meeting with some pretty big questions and scoping on this exercise, and so we're starting the second meeting with presentations from case management system representatives, with the idea that those who have had to create data dashboards and are working on these data productions for the public already would have a sense of what the existing data that's available is and how it's able to be presented. And hopefully that'll give us a foundation to talk about any possible changes or the like. So with that, I will get out of the way and let the presentations begin.
For our members who were not present at our initial meeting, would you mind introducing yourselves?
Senator, Delegate, co-chairs, good morning. I'm Andre Davis, retired judge. Had the great privilege of serving for 30 years on the state and federal courts here in Maryland. Those of you who know me know that I have a long lasting interest in law enforcement prosecutorial processes, and it's a real privilege for me to be a part of this distinguished task force, and I look forward to every opportunity to contribute to its work. I regret that I was unavailable to attend the inaugural meeting, but I'm so pleased to be with you this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that I'm missing? All right. If not, Ms. Pearson, the floor, or I should say the screen, is yours for the prosecutorial performance indicators.
Mel, let me see if I can share my screen. I have the slides here. Tell me if this is working.
Works.
Yes, it is on my end. Perfect. So first off, good morning, everyone. Good morning to the task force. And I would like to thank Delegate Moon and Senator Sidnor for giving us the opportunity to be able to present this morning. My name is Melba Pearson. I serve as the Director of Prosecution Projects based at Florida International University, and I'm one of 4 co-managers of the prosecutorial performance indicators. Dr. Don Steeman from Loyola University of Chicago is another co-manager, and Dr. Brian Johnson is our local researcher. Just to give a very quick 30,000-foot view of what we do. First of all, we started in 2017. That's when we first started working with our 4 pilot sites, in 2 of them based in Florida, 1 in Milwaukee, and 1 Cook County, Chicago. This was the beginning of a process where it was a very thoughtful process that we had embarked on for several years. The founders of this project were people who previously hailed from the Vera Institute of Justice, which, as we know through Mona, is represented on this task force. And it came from a wide background and interest of research around criminal justice practices and how best to quantify this work in order to come up with the list of 55 indicators that we use to help judge an office's performance and give them the tools that they need to be able to work with their staff internally for better outcomes, as well as to build a bridge with the community. We talked to a number of people, including prosecutors, defense attorneys, members of the judiciary, academia, impacted persons, in order to be able to come up with these three broader objectives or categories: capacity and efficiency, community safety and well-being, and fairness and justice. And then we further broke them down into 9 objectives, and within each of those the indicators are housed for a grand total of 55. Now, this work has been fully grant funded. We are a not-for-profit organization. Our only interest is in, really showcasing the work of prosecutors and making sure that that transparency through data is at the forefront of the discussions that are being had in terms of the criminal justice system and the path forward. As I mentioned before, we started with 4 sites. We're now up to 30 sites around the country, where, again, while we are basically the project managers as well as doing the analysis, we always try to partner with local researchers on the ground, because we are well aware that we don't know the laws of every single state, right? All 50 states have different systems, different practices, and different challenges that they face in the criminal justice system that may need to be measured in different ways. So while we do have a list of 55 indicators, we end up customizing them or using a subsection of them for each of the offices based on what their needs and their local context is. One more note about how these indicators were formatted. We came to these indicators because these were things that could be captured and easily measured. So in other words, these are things that can be found in a prosecutor's case management system, can be found in jail data, and can be found from court data. Sometimes we have to supplement with other sources depending on how robust the prosecutor's case management system is, but that is the way that we're able to go about this work. Again, the whole purpose is about transparency and making sure the community understands what justice looks like and can respond accordingly, advocate accordingly, or at least just have that understanding and feel that comfort that the system is working in a fair and equitable manner in their area. So at this point, I'm going to pivot to Dr. Don Steeman for him to talk a little bit more about the national context of how we work with a variety of case management systems and the types of information that we're able to get from each one. Don?
I'm sorry. Sure. I think this was for Brian.
Okay. I'll jump in, Don. Don probably does know more about this in terms of working outside of the state of Maryland. So if there are questions about other kinds of case management systems in other jurisdictions, he's your guy. In terms of Maryland, we've been working with several different jurisdictions that include Montgomery County, Baltimore City, Frederick County, Charles County, and Prince George's County, and there are some other counties that we've been in conversation with. What we've seen so far is that there are 3 main case management systems, and 2 of those 3 are represented here: Judicial Dialogue and PBK, or Prosecutor by Carpel. So I won't talk much about what those specific systems are. I'll just show you quickly kind of 2 screenshots. This is an example of Judicial Dialogue, and one of the things that you can see is that there's information on, what the arrest charge was, what the charges that were filed are, and then also space for information on conviction charges. And so one of the things that the case management systems track is how those charges change over time, which can be useful. This is a screenshot of the second one, which is PBK. And one thing I want to highlight here is just that there's lots of different pieces of information that can and often are collected. So you have information on the charge, detailed information on what the charges filed are, but also information on things like witnesses and defendants, co-defendants, information on other things like evidence in the case and so on. And then you also have information over here that looks at all of the different events in the case. So we can identify, for example, when a plea offer was presented to the defense, when discovery was received or filed, and so on. And from a data standpoint, what's interesting is that this allows us to collect a lot of information about a lot of different relevant characteristics, including defendant victim characteristics, overarching case characteristics, including detailed charging information, information about all the people who touched the case involved persons, and also ultimately the disposition and sentencing outcomes. So just to show you what this looks like in terms of defendant demographics, common things that are collected in the data include things like the name and date of birth, but also age, race, gender, ethnicity. You can also use the data to look at how many times a particular defendant has come through the system, and even where the offense occurred or where the defendant lives. There's also information on basic case characteristics, the number of charges filed, the type and severity of those charges, information about felony charges or misdemeanor charges, filing and disposition dates, and other dates about relevant events that can tell you about the timing of the case processing outcomes. In terms of the charge level data, this is one thing that makes, I think, prosecutor case management systems especially useful, is that we have information on all of the charges, detailed information about every charge that's filed. We also observe all of these charges at conviction, so we can look and see how charges change from filing to conviction in terms of their severity. We can also identify which specific charges a defendant pled guilty to, which charges were dismissed or null prost, and then the defendant's pleas to the different charges as well. Another category of information that can be useful is looking at who's involved in the case. So information about which prosecutor the case is assigned to, what kind of defense counsel existed in the case, and who the defendant's attorney was, information about the judge for cases that are convicted and sentenced eventually, and even information about the arresting police officer. So you can identify kind of the network of people who are involved in the case. Pretty detailed information about case disposition details, things like whether or not the defendant is ultimately convicted of any charges, or was there an alternative, something like probation before judgment that was used in the case. We can also see information about cases that aren't convicted. So if a case was dismissed, there's also information about things like, at least in some of the systems, things like reasons, prosecutor reasons. So for example, here under the STET null prost reason category, in one case, it was thrown out because of a defective charging document. Another case was null prost because there was an alternative to prosecution completed. And a third example, the prosecutor used their discretion to say there was insufficient evidence. So we observe pretty detailed information about outcomes for cases that don't necessarily result in conviction, as well as the number, type, severity of specific charges and how those charges are altered through the plea negotiation process. And then most of the case management systems also include typical sentencing data. What was the type of sentence, how much of the sentence was suspended, what was the probation term, and so on. So you might be asking the question, okay, why do we care about all of this? I'm a researcher, that's why I care about it. But for the public, why should they care? There's a lot of different ways that the data can be used. I'm just going to highlight a couple examples from our work in a few of the different jurisdictions. In Montgomery County, for example, they were interested in how their caseload has changed over time. And that's easy to track using the case management data. So one of the things that you see is that during COVID, there was a sharp decline in number of cases, probably not surprising. But something that they didn't expect was that there was a sharp increase when they switched to MDEC, the Maryland electronic case filing system. And that was because they had a lot of old cases that all got added to the system at once. The state's attorney in Montgomery County was also interested in answering the question, how many of the defendants come from outside of the county? So you can use the data to map where do these cases occur, or where do the defendants come from. And what you see from the map is that a substantial number of cases that are prosecuted in Montgomery County actually come from Prince George's County, Washington, D.C., and the surrounding jurisdictions. We've also just completed for Montgomery County a report looking at racial justice. So it's useful the data can be useful for looking at issues of equity and fairness. This is a graphic from that report that shows case outcomes across different racial and ethnic demographic groups, and you can see that there's close to parity in terms of case outcomes. Probability of conviction or dismissal is very similar across the groups. Another example how the data can be used are for evaluating existing practice and policy changes. So this is from a different jurisdiction, but one of the things when they looked at their data that they realized is that many people were failing to appear for their court dates. And what they did was implement a program where they had an automatic reminders sent to defendants to remind them that they had a court date coming up. And then wanted to know if that made a difference. And so they used the data to show that court appearances increased significantly after implementing this court date reminder program. Another example from another jurisdiction has to do with contact with victims. They wanted to know, they looked at the data and they were surprised that on average, it was about 2 weeks before a prosecutor had reached out to a victim to update them on the status of a case. And they thought that was too long of a time. So they encouraged their attorneys to do this more quickly. And they wanted to know whether or not that performance had changed over time. So they used the data to show that, yes, in fact, the average time to contacting victims had decreased significantly over time. One last example involves Milwaukee, where they had a pretty high conviction rates, lots of cases coming in for low-level possession of marijuana convictions. And the state's attorney made a decision not to actively go after prosecuting low-level drug offenders. And they wanted to be able to communicate with the public to show them that that change had actually been having a difference. So they used the data to show that over time, the number of people who are coming into the system for low-level drug convictions has significantly decreased. In terms of communicating all of this to the public, a number of state's attorneys' offices have been implementing data dashboards. So one that just launched a week or two ago was for Montgomery County. And you can see, you can go there and you can look through sort of the different tabs and all the information that's available. But as an example, if you want to know what proportion of all of their cases that they're prosecuting in circuit court involve person crimes or violent crimes, you can click on the different years and see that. If you want to know what happened in all of the cases in terms of what percentage of the cases are ending in conviction versus dismissal versus some other outcome, you can go to the website and see that. If you want to know whether or not things like guilty plea rates are similar across defendants, that information is available. And you can see here that a very high percentage of defendants plead guilty and that it's similar across demographic groups. And maybe if you're interested in public safety or sending the message that the state's attorney office cares about convicting violent offenses, you can show things like conviction rates for violent offenses over time. So those are some of the uses for the current data that's available and some of the different ways that some of the offices have put it into practice. I want to end with two broader data considerations. One is that you might have concerns about privacy with some of this information, defendant names and so on, but all of that information, all of that data is already publicly available in Maryland. If you go to the Maryland Judiciary Case Search, anybody can type in a person's name or type in a case number. I just put in my name here. You can see how my name's quite common, so lots of people come up. You can click on any of these case numbers and get information about, the personal characteristics of the defendant, information about the case. You can also see detailed information about what the charges were, how they pled, what happened in the case in terms of a sentencing outcome. And so all of this data that I'm talking about is already publicly available. The issue with the Maryland Judiciary Case Search data is that it reports the data in this PDF file based on a single case or a single defendant. So it's difficult to use the data in any kind of systematic way to look at overarching patterns or changes. The second data set that is commonly used in Maryland to look at punishment outcomes, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. I know Senator Sidnor and Delegate Moon, you're both on the Sentencing Commission. And Dr. Soule has done a really good job managing the Sentencing Commission and collecting really high quality, reliable data. But that data is limited to cases that are guidelines eligible. It only reports information on defendants who have been convicted in the case. We only know information about what the final charge of conviction was, and there's no information at all about any of the district court cases. And that's the vast majority of people who come in contact with the criminal legal system in Maryland. It's not the serious cases in circuit court. It's the run-of-the-mill cases in district court. So we're lacking information on all of these things that happen when cases are discontinued for some reason, or a case doesn't end in conviction. We're lacking information on all of the decisions that are made prior to conviction, things like whether there's some kind of alternative like probation before judgment employed, whether the number of charges or the severity of charges or felony charges are being altered as part of that plea negotiation process. And that's really important because in Maryland, like in most jurisdictions, the vast majority of criminal cases are resolved through guilty pleas. And even this bubble down here, anybody who's acquitted at trial, we don't have information on from the Sentencing Commission data. So that those data are really great, but they only touch a small percentage of all the people who are coming through the courts in Maryland at any given time. So in conclusion, there are different case management systems. You're going to hear from two of the vendors here. The details and the quality of the data can vary depending on which system you have in place, but overall, the information that's collected tends to be pretty similar. The case management systems cover a much broader range of criminal cases. We have information from arrest, because the Maryland police typically file arrest charges all the way through sentencing, and for all cases in both district and circuit court. The case processing information that's available tends to be a lot more detailed because you can look at all of the charges at arrest, all of the charges at indictment, charges at conviction. We also have additional information on things like why cases might be dismissed, at least in some of the systems. And we can better get at that plea negotiation process, which, as I said, I think is quite important. So overall, I think there's multiple applications for the data. If you're interested in issues related to public safety, things like conviction rates can be looked at. Investigating issues related to fairness and equity. We can look at differences across demographic groups, evaluating policies or changes within the office and if they had any effect. And just in general, I think the data can be used to help offices be more efficient, more effective, and certainly more transparent and accountable to the public, which of course is what this task force was really about. So I'll end there and we can entertain questions. I don't know if that's now or after the next presentation, but thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Let's entertain some questions. Let's see here. All right. Delegate Moon and Ms. Warnken.
Thank you, Senator. I hate to jump in the front of the queue, but I do have some basic questions about this. One, it sounds like if we're interested in this enterprise at all, then that the first prerequisite step is that the jurisdictions in question have a case management system. And so I'm just curious, for the Montgomery County example, if all of the data that's presented there is that's solely within that office's case management system, or did they go outside at all to incorporate any additional data? So that's the first question. And it relates then also to the 55 points and how universally available those might be in the various counties that we're looking at. So again, I'm just thinking about what I just heard and thinking about, okay, can this be done in the various Maryland counties? How easily? What would it take? I'm just starting to think ahead towards the discussion about recommendations and possibilities, if that's at all possible.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Delegate Moon. And Melba or Don, jump in here if you have anything to add. I can speak to the Montgomery County case. That was a unique situation where they were actually using Justware when we started working with them, a different case management system. And in the process of looking at their data, they weren't collecting a lot of the pieces of information that that we thought were important or that you might want to have. And the state's attorney, John McCarthy, he recognized that as well. So one of the things that they did in Montgomery County was decide to move to a new case management system. So they implemented PBK, which you're going to hear from a representative from that organization later, and with an eye toward collecting all of the pieces of information that you would want to have to be able to do these things. Most case management systems do collect all of the things that I showed you, or at least most of them, but there is variation across different systems. Some of the examples I showed were from Baltimore City. Baltimore City has, from my experience, maybe the best data in the state in terms of prosecutor case management data. And they collect a lot of detailed information that isn't necessarily collected everywhere. They also have a data analyst who works in that capacity. So there is some variation across jurisdictions, but certainly the basic things about demographic characteristics of defendants and charges and outcomes of cases is pretty uniformly available in most case management systems.
And sorry, if I may just quickly clarify that then. So they need a case management system. Not all of them sound like they work for what we're trying to do here since Montgomery County switched. And then it sounds like in addition to having that case management system, there's likely going to need to be a new office protocol of some sort and training to get people to start collecting data that A, they didn't already collect, and B, in the format of this new case management system.
Well, so yeah, I wasn't clear. I'm sorry. The data I presented was from the old system, the JustWare system. So that data was already, all of the data, the screenshots I showed you were that's from the old case management system. But then when we were talking about that list of 50 some indicators, there were some things in the list that wasn't information that was being collected, and so they proactively made the decision to switch to a case management system to try to collect additional things to populate more of those measures. But what I showed you was from their current system.
And just to piggyback on that, and I'll pivot to Don after that. You start where you are, right? We've gone into jurisdictions around the country that just got a case management system, maybe collected some data, but not consistently. So we work with them to what we call develop a data culture, right? So we do trainings and, try to identify what are the key aspects that this particular office wants to measure. What does the community want to learn more about? Like what are the key pressure points that they really want to explore internally or externally? And from there, we work with them on how best to collect that. It could be retraining the prosecutors that when they close out their cases, make sure to go into every drop-down menu and, click the appropriate, resolution. Or it may be instead of writing a narrative, which makes it harder to be able to pull from a data extraction perspective, then maybe it's working with the vendor to create another shorter field or another drop-down box or multiple choice type thing to be able to capture that information. And so just because, 55 is the goal, to this date, we've not had anyone do all 55, but close. We've had some in the 40-something range. But again, not every indicator will apply to every jurisdiction because, again, if the laws just may not apply to that particular indicator, or it just may not make sense in the context of what the community is working with and experiencing. So start small, and we can always, the collective we can always build from there. And Don, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing that to your point about needing a case management system and one that collects information that the public wants to know, or even that the office wants to know. The Urban Institute did a survey a few years ago asking prosecutors' offices about their ability to collect data and what kind of metrics they could produce. They had a list of just 7 pretty basic indicators that they asked offices if they were able to produce. Cases filed by offense type, the defendant demographics, dispositions on cases. While 90% of the offices could produce at least one, there were 10% of offices who couldn't produce any of them. And there were only 30 or 40% of offices who could produce all 7 of them, meaning there were 60 to 70% of offices who could not do that. And these were some pretty basic indicators. So there's certainly a need for case management systems in offices that don't have them, or an improvement in the case management systems in those that do. And I'll just piggyback on Melba's point too about the indicators. Some of our indicators, most of our indicators come directly from prosecutor case management data, but some of them don't. And it could, but it currently doesn't. So things like pretrial detention status of defendants is often not in prosecutor case management systems. To get that often requires cooperation with local sheriffs or with the judiciary. There are a few others that get at the ability to pay bail is often not recorded in a prosecutor case management system, nor are measures of recidivism after someone's sentenced into probation. So in that sense, some of the indicators require cooperation outside the prosecutor's office, and a lot of those we're not able to populate either because we can't get cooperation or that data doesn't exist elsewhere, either in a readily accessible form.
Good, Delegate Moon. All right, Ms. Warnken.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the very helpful presentation. And my question is actually related to Delegate Moon's and the information you're already sharing. But I'm curious about sort of the difference between capability to collect versus actual collection and missingness. And I recall, for example, I believe it was in the report that you co-authored, Mr. Johnson, about racial disparities in prosecution in Baltimore, which you noted has some of the strongest data collection across the state, that fields like socioeconomic characteristics and other key information often went missing. And so I'm wondering if you could speak more kind of on the culture of that or challenges of that, especially as it relates to using the data on the back end to do analyses around issues that have policy implications, both in that jurisdiction and comparatively across the state, and sort of how making aspects of this mandatory versus optional influences those challenges.
Yeah, thank you for your question. It's a good one. And in Baltimore, you're right that even though they have very good quality data, there were indicators, or not indicators in the PPI indicators, but just measures that we would have been interested in looking at. So I'll give you one example. They have a field for the recommendation that the prosecutor makes at sentencing. And, you know, judges oftentimes react to these reports because you show sentencing outcomes and they say, well, we don't always control the sentence. You know, in Maryland, there are ABA pleas that are legally binding. And, you know, they're often used in some jurisdictions. And so sometimes judges would say, well, is this really reflecting judicial discretion or something else? And we thought, well, we can look at what the prosecutor recommended and compare it to what the judge did and get at that issue. And the data was there, but it was not there consistently enough, where, you know, some prosecutors would regularly record their recommendations and some prosecutors wouldn't. And so I think it gets back to something that Melba said about the data culture. You know, the socioeconomic issue that you raise is another one. They did have a field for socioeconomic, like whether the defendant was employed or a education level. Those are rare. Most case management systems do not collect that kind of detailed information. And so even though those fields were in the case management system at Baltimore, nobody was completing those. They were almost always empty. I think it comes down to, you know, what Don said, which there are some basic things that virtually all of them can collect and look at least for, you know, tracking trends over time or how an office is doing, or if they implement a change, does it have any impact on those basic outcomes like case outcomes, number of cases filed or convicted over time. You know, those are things that I think most offices can do. But when you get down to the more detailed things, you know, it is common for them not to be completed or not to be completed at a high enough rate to really be very usable.
If I could add one thing, I think it raises two questions about offices, and one of them is certainly about the culture of data use and being a data-driven organization, but there are others too around capacity and resources and ability to collect the data. Not all offices have support staff that can enter some of the information that some might want to come out of the case management system. And when there's a lack of support staff to do that, it makes it hard. Often there's no ability within offices to audit their data either, to understand where there's missingness in the data. That usually comes with having a data analyst or someone with some analysis, you know, propensity in the office to routinely audit the case management system. We find that to be rare across all of the offices where we work. Rarely is there somebody in the office who has the capacity or the time to regularly audit their case management system to figure out where there's missingness. And I think that leads to problems of missing data. Just one more thing to think about too is it's often a technological problem as well. What we find in some case management systems is prosecutors produce a lot of notes, but they tend to be in text fields that are not easily extractable. You can't get information out of them in an easy way. Either that's because they're in confidential parts of the case management system where you might not go back to, or they're just in the text fields where it's hard to mine those for data. That's a technological problem that some offices face, that it's not in a place that it's easily extractable.
And one model I think that could be helpful moving forward, because I know that Delegate Moon, you're thinking, okay, next steps, moving forward, that sort of thing, is encouraging, local partnerships. So as offices throughout Maryland decide to take on, improve their case management system or do more work around data, there's the resources from the University of Maryland, there's Bowie State University, there's, Townsend, there's so many local universities that do have criminologists and analysts on staff that can help. Number one, they understand the local context. But number two, it can kind of save so that it's not a situation of, if I can't handle a data analyst or a data entry person, there's no way I can do this work. Well, if you can work with the local partners, that can be one way to be able to address that issue, or even national partners. Again, the PPIs are a resource, VERA is a resource. There are a number of organizations that are doing work around the space. So there are options for offices that do not have the bandwidth to be able to bring some of those folks in-house.
I saw Miss Faulkner, and I thought I saw another hand, but Miss Faulkner.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you for the presentation. And my question may be more for later presenters, so if it is, please let me know. Mine relates more to, once this data is collected and available and it's being analyzed, I know that some of the systems have the capability to sort out defendants who are not necessarily residents of that county or the city, or possibly not even Maryland. Are we aware, is there the capability of the case management systems that you've been working with for all of them to do that? Or is that something that we would have to kind of look at, that capability?
I can talk quickly, Brian, about
Thank
across
you.
the states that we've worked. They all collect defendant address information, so it's easy to weed out defendants who are not either from the specific jurisdiction or even from the state in case management system. It's going to vary, but the ones that we've worked with, I'm pretty sure all of them collect defendant address.
Okay, good. Thank you. Because I know that you're well aware that depending on the proximity of a certain county or a city to other factors like major corridors, et cetera, that sometimes they have a higher proportion of people that are committing crimes that are not from that area. And I just want to make sure we have the ability to look at that as well. Thank you.
Dr. Sule, I think it was your hand that I saw before. Is your question been answered?
Yeah, and I in hindsight, thank you, Senator Sidnor. I think my question was a little too early, and it's more of a grander picture question that I think I'll reserve for a later meeting, probably.
Very good. I see no other questions from the group, so I had a few that I wanted to ask. One, with regards to the your experience and I think you said about 30 offices, what type of feedback have you all received from the state's attorney's offices after them going through this particular process in terms of this data then being made available? And to provide context to why I'm asking this question, I believe at our last meeting, there was some concern that was noted about how the data may be weaponized. Is that something? What has been the feedback that you all have gotten?
So I can definitely take that question, Senator Sidnor. I would say that the reaction has been overwhelmingly positive. We have not had anyone that has released a dashboard and somehow that resulted in dire consequences or, some sort of negative outcomes as a result. What the elected prosecutors have been able to do in a variety of different formats is, number one, examine internal policies, change policies when they realized, for instance, we had one jurisdiction that did not realize that the way they were communicating diversion offers were not actually making it to the people that were charged. So in other words, they were sending things by mail, and of course, addresses changed, people may be experiencing homelessness or something along those lines, didn't know that they're eligible for diversion, and therefore were not taking advantage of that ability to have it removed from their record. Once they were able to identify that through the data work and looking at the trends, they were able to change that practice so that more people that were charged and eligible for diversion were able to become a part of the program and reap the benefits. So that's just one example. We had another district attorney who basically went on tour and did weekly town halls in various parts of his community, showcasing his dashboard, talking about the results, and owning some of the outcomes that could be perceived as negative. And the reaction was always, okay, thank you for that. Can we work together? Can we provide feedback, something along those lines, or just thank you for the information? But I can assure you, the offices that we've worked with, I don't believe there's one elected that will say the sky has fallen as a result of releasing a public-facing dashboard.
Sorry, if I can just add one thing. I think what we found in all of the jurisdictions we've worked with is that releasing data publicly grounds the conversation in data rather than anecdote. And that's conversations not just with the community and interest groups or stakeholders, but it's with other criminal justice system actors, so that it grounds the conversation in something that's tangible and data-driven for conversations with the public defender's office, with the judiciary, that's not about anecdote, but it's about rumors. And I think that's where the real benefit has come to the offices. I mean, publicly releasing data is just part of this. We all of the officers we work with use data internally too, and it's about changing a culture inside an office to be a data-driven organization rather than an anecdote-driven organization. And I think that's where the real benefit comes in, that prosecutors' offices internally are starting to talk in terms of data rather than individual cases.
And Dr. Johnson, one of your slides, a couple of your slides, I believe you were looking at some of the information that one could get from MDEC and as well as the Sentencing Commission. Is there information that could only be obtained from looking at these case management systems that we weren't going to find in these other systems?
Yeah, very good question, Senator Sidnor. So yes is the answer, but most of the key information, basic demographics, charge information, what happened in the case, did they plead guilty, and what was the sentence, all of that's available in that kind of online, you can search the court documents and you can see a list of every event that happened in that case, and it's pretty detailed. I think where there's differences are in offices where they've kind of tried to take a step to collect additional information. One of the ones that I think is a good example of that are prosecutors' reasons for null prosing a case. So Baltimore is a good example because they have very detailed list of all the different reasons when prosecutors decide not to go forward with a case. And one of the things that came out of our cooperation with them was they rightly pointed out that it looks misleading if you just say the dismissal rate is this, because sometimes when they null pros a case, it's because they're actually prosecuting, there's maybe two cases against the defendant, they're null prosing one but going forward with the other. In other cases, defendants are being sent to federal court. And so it's not that they're not being prosecuted, they're just not being prosecuted in Baltimore City Circuit Court. And so, because they had that sort of detailed information about the reasons why cases were being null prosed, they were able to say, yes, the dismissal rate is this, but actually among all of those defendants, it's only this percentage of people, right, who aren't being somehow pursued in another venue or in another way. And that kind of information certainly wouldn't be available in like the judiciary case search data.
And I know you mentioned Charles, Prince George's, Baltimore City, and Montgomery. Were you all also working with Frederick County as well?
Yeah, if I neglected to mention them, we have been working with Frederick County as well.
Senator McKay.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Thank you, Mr. Senator. So my question is on these dashboards of the examples of people have been already been using the system and such with that data. We heard that they've done some internal changing of policies and that kind of stuff. Has any of them said that their communities are safer now because of the dashboard and because of this data? Because it tends to mean, similar to my last question for the last program or the last meeting that we had was, has any of these people that are using this program, this data and that kind of stuff said that their communities are safer now than they were before? And they may not have gotten to that point yet, but just to know if that is a question, Ms. Pearson.
Yeah, Senator McKay, I'll just jump in for a moment. In Maryland, we don't have enough time to have an answer to that question. Montgomery County just released the first PPI dashboard, 2 weeks ago or something like that. Baltimore has been using their own dashboard. They've created their own dashboard just to sort of have that information out there, but it's a limited version compared to what Montgomery County and other offices that we're working with has done. So I don't think there's enough data yet, enough time hasn't passed to answer the question in Maryland. But either Don or Melba may have other information from the other jurisdictions. I'm not sure about that.
And I would say more generally, when you're looking at the chart and if you're seeing that, okay, violent crime is decreasing over time, or we're seeing increased prosecutions and convictions around violent crime, then the conclusion can be drawn by the community, by journalists or whoever's observing, okay, our community is getting safer. You know, the reality is sometimes looking at the data will raise other questions. As in, okay, well, why aren't certain cases being addressed in a certain way? Or why are there disparities depending on socioeconomics or whatever, which causes you to have to dig in more and do more research and try to understand if there's a deeper problem. But if you're seeing a positive trend, which is showing a decrease in crime, then that's definitely, I would think, something to celebrate.
And that's the point of my question is there actually somebody outside of Maryland who has been doing this and using this data that they can say the perception of my community that I sworn, and these I'm talking about the state's attorneys, that I've taken an oath to protect. Can I say that my community is safer now? That's why I'm just looking for that as an example.
I'll just jump in. I think it's hard to put a causal connection between, say, simply releasing a dashboard and making data public and making the public safer. The feeling of safety is tough to. None of the offices that we work at have ever engaged in a citizen survey to understand people's perceptions of crime or safety in their neighborhoods. I can't give a couple of examples, and it's probably not going to be as satisfying as you might hope. But in Colorado, where we've worked out with now 14 jurisdictions across the state, 14 of the 22 offices, they have used their public release of data to talk about motor vehicle theft, which is a really big problem in Colorado. And they've used it to talk about how they're addressing motor vehicle theft through the prosecutor's office. And in that sense, talking about increase in conviction rates and the increase in the use of incarceration for motor vehicle theft in the state. And in that way, communicating to the public that they understand the public is concerned about motor vehicle theft and that the office itself is taking it seriously. I think one of the examples that Brian talked through too about the failure to appear rate, that was also from another Colorado jurisdiction. While not directly related to public safety, defendants not showing up to court is tangentially related to public safety concerns, people not being held accountable for what they've done, concerns about them committing new offenses while on pretrial release. And in there, they specifically wanted to show that the court notification program that they started with the judiciary had an impact on people showing up to court, which I think is a way to communicate to the public that we're making efforts to make the community safer by holding defendants accountable in court.
Well, thank you, everyone, for your answers. I still go back to my original statement that at the end of the day, we're supposed to be making sure that the community is safe and the community understands that. And there's a lot of information here, a lot of good information that we need to know, I assume to know, but at the end of the day, what are you going to do with said information? And as Senator Sidnor said, there was some concern about what this information was going to do. And at the end of the day, it is the pulse of the community that says if they feel they are safe or not. And we can talk about all the data we want, but perception is reality. And so I think we're making some good progress. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Mr. McKesson.
Two things. One, I wanted to thank you, Chair Sidnor, for asking the question about the chilling effect. It was helpful to hear that there was not a chilling effect when this data was released. That was helpful. The second thing, following up on the last line of questioning, and this is for any of the experts, but it is my firm understanding that the perception of crime has not always followed the data and vice versa, right? That like when we have measured people's perception of a crime, when crime has been at a historic low, people might still feel unsafe and vice versa. So I just wanted to understand your understanding of that with the literature and the research on the perception of crime, because that is my understanding. And if I'm incorrect, I'd love to be told.
Yeah, very good question. And I think you're right that objective indicators of crime are not always that highly correlated with people's perception of crime. Part of that has to do with other factors like media coverage, what's being highlighted, that oftentimes even if crime rates have been falling since the early 1990s, but if you ask the average person on the street whether or not they feel, really safe now compared to 10 years ago, most people don't realize that crime rates are low. But I think that actually speaks to the utility of the data and the dashboards, because one of the things that offices can do is show that, right? They can show, or even just perceptions of safety have to do with, what's the state's attorney's office doing? One example, Montgomery County, that I know John McCarthy's interested in is around firearm cases. And he's talked about that seems to be a community concern. So one of the things we've talked about, we haven't done this yet, but talked about doing on the dashboard is what if we isolate all of the gun-related crimes and we take a look at like what percent of those cases are being prosecuted, or what percent of those cases, are ending in conviction or ending in some kind of incarceration sentence, to show the public, hey, we are taking this issue seriously, and look, we're actually doing something about it. And those kinds of that communication aspect of using the data is a way of shaping public perceptions about crime. And I think historically, frankly, the state's attorney's office and many justice actors haven't played a role in that. And so, one way to use the data is to have a more active role in shaping the narrative around what's happening with major issues that the community is concerned with.
Got it. And my last question is there, if an office is starting to collect data, I have to imagine that you built these dashboards, that all of you built the dashboards over time. People didn't have all the data on day one. What have you found to be the easiest, or maybe easy is not the right word, but the lowest lift data to start collecting in the phase one of building these things?
Well, this isn't going to be a very satisfying answer. It's all dependent on the jurisdiction, because many of them are starting from very different places, right? We've started with offices who have a homegrown case management system that they've never looked at data or tried to extract data from. So it's been an incredibly heavy lift to help them even get data out of their case management system, to look at very simple things like the case is filed, then the case is disposed, and the sentences imposed after disposition. Other offices are very adept at pulling data from their case management systems and give us, a backup of their entire database. And that's the case, then it's fairly easy for us to produce at least initial sets of descriptive metrics about cases incoming and cases outgoing from the system. So we try to start with some pretty simple stuff to give offices just a quick look at what's happening in their system. Cases filed, cases disposed, sentences imposed, and then if we can, break it down by offense types and defending characteristics.
All right, Dr. Soleil.
Yeah, I apologize. I decided, well, in hindsight, we may not have these experts here with us again, so I might as well ask it now. So I guess what my question would be is, this task force is charged with coming up with establishing transparency standards on a statewide basis. And have talked about how you work with all these individual jurisdictions. And I'm just curious, can you speak to experiences? Are there other states that have tried to tackle coming up with common metrics, common standards statewide? And what are your suggestions for this task force? How would you go about doing that? Because, you spoke about, and we know, as Mr. Gibson told us, all 24 counties, they all have, not all have all different case management systems, but it's at least 3 or 4 different case management systems. How would you suggest, what approach might you take to work across 24 jurisdictions and come up with common metrics? So I'd just be curious, since I would be remiss if I hadn't asked this group what you think would be a good recommendation.
Melba, do you mind if I take this?
Yeah, I was going to say, Don can give a really great analysis of this based on our work in Colorado. And then after he's done, I have a few suggestions.
Yeah, for the last 2 years, we've been working with 14 jurisdictions in Colorado. It's 14 of the 22 prosecutors' offices in the state, in an effort to do exactly that. So Colorado's a bit different. They have a single case management system for the entire state. Every prosecutor's office has the same one. It's administered and maintained by a quasi-governmental group, the Colorado District Attorneys Council. It's a paid membership organization from all of the district attorneys in the state. And that council then built and maintains the case management system for the entire state. What that allows is the extraction of identical data for every prosecutor's office in the state of Colorado, and the creation of a common set of metrics across the state. So how we did it there, knowing that we had the same data from everybody, we put together a set of work groups in the state made up of staff from across the offices, and they worked collectively to come up with common definitions that they could all agree to through consensus about what they meant by a violent crime, or what they meant by a plea dismissal. We worked with them to help define a set of reason codes that would be universally used across the state to provide reasons for why prosecutors made certain decisions, why they declined to prosecute a case, why they dismissed a case after filing. We also used those groups to create what we call the sustainability group. So our work in Colorado is done, but we want the work to continue. So this sustainability group, again, is made up of staff members from across the offices that we work with, and they meet monthly to work through issues that are arising now that we're gone, to make sure this work continues. It also created a data analyst group from across the offices, including those who have paid analysts on staff, but also offices that don't have paid analysts who can benefit from working with some of the larger jurisdictions on how to analyze the data. With that, we also encouraged the Colorado DA's Council, this quasi-governmental group, to hire additional staff, which then audit the case management system on a regular basis to make sure the data is of good quality and not missing, and to continue to create both internal dashboards and external dashboards for the office. So I don't know that that's a blueprint for Maryland. Again, there's no statewide case management system here, but some of the processes that we put in place, these work groups across offices, worked really well to get everyone to agree on a set of metrics and a set of definitions that they would all commonly use, and to sustain the work after the work with us and the foundation funding expired. And with that is moving to a state supported model, so that they're going to the legislature to look for additional funds to not just support the Colorado District Attorney's Council, but to support the hiring of analysts potentially in smaller offices that can't afford it on their own.
And from the Maryland perspective, as we mentioned, we were working with 5 different states' attorneys' offices. We already have a convening group that meets about every 2-3 months to talk about the work. One of our upcoming meetings will be focused on which indicators that should, be published across all of the dashboards of the sites that we're working with, as well as making sure we have a common agreement on the flow of cases through the system, as well as definitions and things like that. But I think one of the most important things for this task force in terms of recommendations has to be a funding stream. And I know it's always a touchy, tough topic, but the reality is if you have some offices that are starting from ground zero that want to get a case management system but don't have that financial allocation, there's no way that you're going to be able to have that uniform dashboard unless everyone has a case management system. So if there was a funding stream that could, number one, support offices in getting a case management system or improving their case management system. If they already are in a good place, then maybe use that allocation of funds to hire a data analyst or hire a data entry person, or separately, be able to work with a local university to kind of help get that work done. I think that would go a long way because, again, each of the offices are already dealing with staffing and retention concerns, other budgetary constraints. And so just to ask them to do this as an unfunded mandate, I think would be setting this up for failure. So there would have to be a funding stream. And then in terms of indicators, we're happy to submit a suggested list of things to consider in terms of what offices can, at least as a baseline, be able to collect, or we can wait until after the convening that is coming up in the next few months, I believe in February or so. And after that discussion is had, we can submit that. But I understand there is a time crunch. So we're at your disposal, whatever way would be most helpful.
Thank you.
If I could,
we have.
I'm sorry, Senator Sidner. Could I just add one thing? In terms of the policy recommendations moving forward for this committee, I think one thing you need to know is where everybody is at, right? So with 24 counties, I mean, one recommendation would be to start by collecting some information about what case management systems different offices have, what might be their data capacity, that type of thing, because you probably need to know where everybody's beginning from to have an informed recommendation. And the second idea would be to think about possibly having something like a pilot study where maybe, you want a proof of concept, demonstrate this can be done, maybe not with all 24 jurisdictions, because that's a heavy lift, but in places that are already moving towards it. I could see, a recommendation being, well, at least for the places where we know this is possible, can they all take similar steps to create similar measures to show that this is, that it's doable before trying to do it on a statewide level. Thank you.
Thank you. And Delegate Valentine, I see you. We'll get to have you ask your question, but I wanted to let everyone know that Ms. Carpel has a hard stop at 11:30. So as soon as you ask your question, whomever can answer that question, please be as succinct as possible. Then we'll move into the presentation. Delegate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe my question was already answered. I just wanted to confirm, having talked to many of the state's attorneys in my region, that if you do have multiple systems, we could still move towards a goal without them having to change their systems that's in place, which was just answered. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Awesome. All right, Ms. Carpel, the floor is yours. And thank you very much for the presentation, you all.
Great. Well, thank you. Let me just pull up my slides here for a second. All right. Are you guys seeing my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thank you for letting us have a chance to talk today and tell you about our case management system, Prosecutor by Carpel. So as stated earlier in the presentation, my name is Leanne Carpel. I am president here at Carpel Solutions. We are a full-fledged case management system. We handle cases from cradle to grave, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it so that you have some background before we jump right into how this affects transparency that we're able to provide. So First, we are currently in 33 different states, over 680 prosecution and a few public defender offices. We are utilized by some of the smallest and some of the largest offices throughout the US. One of the things that I heard you guys talk a lot about here on this presentation was the ability to track different metrics and what's important to your office. Because PBK is so highly configurable, you can decide what is important, what isn't important, and actually customize your product to your experience and needs, which is how we manage to work both in those small offices and those large offices. We've been around for over 20 years with the experience of working in America's judicial system. We actually started here. My father started the company, and he started here in St. Louis, Missouri, and we have obviously expanded quite a bit since then. So in Maryland, we do actually have quite a few Maryland counties. This is the list of counties who currently use PBK: Allegheny, Anne Arundel, Baltimore, Caroline, Cecil, Charles, and Hartford. And, oh, sorry, and then there's another section here. Montgomery, of course, we were just talking about them. They are currently a PBK user. We also have Somerset, Worcester, Wicomico, St. Mary's, and Talbot. So we're pretty, we're in a lot of Maryland. We work with you guys quite frequently. Now, because we do host so much data, and so much of it, like you had mentioned, PPI and various other important information that we don't wish to get out, we have very strict security standards. We partner with Microsoft, and everything that we do is hosted in their Azure government cloud. So we're CGIS, FedRAMP, and HIPAA certified. All of our data is encrypted, and we back up everything and do redundancies across 3 different time zones. We have near real-time replication to secondary Azure zones in Texas, which means that if something happened to your system, you would be brought up almost immediately in another server, and you're constantly redundantly backed up. That means your data is fully secure and never going to, you'll never lose it. We keep it very, very secure. We also have no file type limitations, no file size limitations. And we're browser specific, so we're not something you download onto your computer. So we are supported across all devices: Edge, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. And we, of course, do tablets for people who like to be in court and hold their tablet while they're actually working in court, because our case system does work for attorneys who are in court to go through their docket and update all that information that they need as going down their case list. And of course, in the browser, which is what most people want to use, because while we do have a mobile app, most people do not want to do data entry on their thumbs. So, all right, what makes us different? So one of the things about transparency that's really important, and I'll highlight this again in another slide here in a second, is we have the option for counties to opt into what we call statewide. Now, statewide allows counties to see if there is a person who has involvement in other jurisdictions, and it's very limited data. So basically, it just gives you a heads up to say, hey, this person has something going on in this neighboring county, and maybe you should give them a call and see what's up. So that is an opt-in feature. Not everybody opts in, but I believe a lot of Maryland has. So also, we, with the dawn of body cams and cell phone videos and everything large media management, we do have a fully robust and functioning video editing and management system. You're able to transcode, which is a fancy word for convert, because a lot of times we get odd file formats and you can't actually stream them. So you can convert it. We use Microsoft's AI to automatically transcript those videos. We can automatically use that same AI to redact faces and trim and clip videos so that you can actually prepare those for court, get them ready, and package them up. Also, very important here, e-discovery. So we allow people to electronically send their discovery packets to their defense attorneys. It also tracks all the downloading and logging and linking to ensure that those attorneys received the packet and got all the files within it. And so sometimes this comes up that you need to prove that discovery was sent. So we do have all of that tracked, logged, and reported upon. Additionally, one thing that makes us different from a lot of other systems is we were talking about that legacy data. When we come from other systems and we bring new people onto PBK, we do not leave their old data behind. We realize that's really important. I have a whole team of data converters, which I can actually see from my office here, whose whole job is to make sure that when you decide to go with PBK, we take all your data with you. We take that old database and we actually go ahead and convert it and make it match and go into PBK. And that's actually kind of an ongoing process because you guys know your data better than anybody else. And we need you to help us verify that we've done it right. So we do it once, y'all help us check it, we do it again, and we just keep doing that until we get it right. And then you go live and nothing is left behind. Also, we have significant integrations to unify data. We do already interface with MDEC, which is your court system, to bring in cases and case information. But we also integrate with vendors such as evidence.com and NICE. And last I checked, we were interfacing with a variety of, I think it was 600 different interfaces that we had. It's probably more at this point, across all the different states for us to work with law enforcement and courts and criminal history we send that data out via an interface. So PBK really is this full, complete system that's everything a prosecutor needs from when the case is initiated to when the case ends. So this is what I touched on briefly a slide ago. This is our statewide system. So what you're looking at here in this picture is actually our person screen, because PBK is a person-centric system, because instead of cases, we focus on that person because you have one individual who is committing crime out there, regardless of how many cases that they may have. We have a page dedicated to learn all about them where we house all that data. And one of those buttons there, you can see it blue with the arrow, is our statewide button. In PBK, when things are blue, that means there's more information behind them as opposed to black. It kind of gives you a quick view right away where there's stuff to see. So we can see the statewide button on this is blue. And when I click that, a little page pops up and it says, hey, Mr. Charles Robert Bogus actually does have some other cases in other systems within your state. Now, this is really helpful for prosecution offices because, as we know, a lot of people drive and they don't often keep track of their, county lines to commit their crimes in. So your neighboring counties and all sharing just high-level information as to the background of these people is really very valuable. And yeah, it's an opt-in process as well. So not everybody wants to share this information for some reason or another. So we do get the prosecuting attorney to sign off, we turn it on, and then data shares back and forth. This is really powerful. Also in California, they use it very heavily in our installations. All right, so transparency, the reason we're all here today to talk about. We talked about PPI and what Montgomery County has put together, which is fantastic. And we're really glad that they could use PBK's data as kind of the backbone to get a lot of that in. But Carpel Solutions, our company, also has another arm called our Carpel Foundation. We actually do have a foundation which is dedicated to providing transparency in prosecution offices. Portions of the Carpel funds go to that, but it's actually a board of elected prosecutors in which none of us Carpels who work in the business actually get any sort of voting rights. So it's all prosecutor led, it's all prosecutor driven, and the prosecutors on this board actually developed this dashboard, which PBK is able to fund. I'll go ahead and give you a quick click through here. So this here, are you still able to see my screen? You should see a browser now. So I'll take that as
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we can see it.
Perfect. So this is public facing. If y'all want to go, you can click around. This is carpelfoundation.com. Mariposa is one of the people who have opted in. This is California. And these are all under our measures here. So these dashboards are created from PBK data and provided after somebody requests it at no charge to that office, so that they can actually embed this on their own website or, you know, do what they will with it. Some of them just leave them here and they link it from their website. But as you can see, these are the measures that were defined by the prosecutors on that board. And we can see they're tracked historically. Also, you can see cases dismissed or various other, and it updates as it goes. You can see also segments by race and ethnicity, sex, and so on and so forth. You can slice and dice this many different ways. And so this is one of the offerings that we have through this Carpel Foundation with the PBK data. And also, aside from just the the Carpel Foundation dashboard, our company, that side of it, Carpel Solutions, is always willing to help build these dashboards and support our friends actually who make their own dashboards. So this is a dashboard that's powered by PBK data that was created by Jackson County, Missouri. This is not foundation related, but you can see they're able to put together a dashboard, and this is a public dashboard you can see from their site. We also have King County, which is Seattle, Washington. This is their public dashboard that they have built with the backbone of PBK data. And you can see all of their filings, declines, dispositions, etc. And of course, I just wanted to show another variation of it. This is Pinal's, Arizona. And so that is the transparency that our product can offer. And yeah, thank you for your time today. That's happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Gibson.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Question I have is this: what does Carpel, the full suite you described, what does it cost? So what is the cost to the state's attorney's office of the county for the full-on suite that you described, including the sharing of data, all the things you described in the presentation?
Yeah, the sharing of data, the statewide option that I showed, and also if you wish to do this dashboard here, there's no cost for that. PBK does have, we do a combo of a licensing agreement and then also an annual support maintenance, right? Because Microsoft charges us, so we have to charge you. So what we do is we do it by number of full-time employees in that office. A license is $22.50 and annual maintenance is $450, and then we do have a hosting fee of $150. Interfaces, which is like that MDEC information coming in, is also an additional fee, but we charge a flat rate for that, and I believe it's 10,000. So we could add up the number of users pretty easily, but that's our
So
rate.
I'll use my office as an example. I have 92 employees.
Mm-hmm.
What would it cost for 92 employees at the State's Attorney's Office in Howard County to have access to PBK?
I could get you a quote if you would like, but if I just pull up my calculator, if we go, let's say you said 92 employees.
Yes, ma'am.
So it would be $22.50 plus our hosting of 100 plus $450. So that's per user times 92, you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Around there, one-time costs. And then every year it would not cost this much. Every year after that, that would be your $450 plus, oh, I messed that up, sorry. And honestly, we may have discounts and all, this is all just really back of the napkin math. So, and if I do that times 92, that would be about your annual cost, roughly speaking. There are some additional fees for, interface support, and also extra storage. We do have one of the most affordable storage rates in the market, especially with body cam and all. It's $500 a terabyte. you get 2 terabytes for free. But like honestly, body cams are becoming such a big thing. So we do also add that in. And then annual maintenance for interfaces is normally 20% what our one-time fee is.
So 20% of the one-time fee plus 50K annually plus 500 per terabyte for body worn camera per year.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, not per body worn, per terabyte of data. I mean, the reason I say body worn camera, I mean, is because those tend to be the biggest. Honestly,
Right.
if you're housing your cell phone rips, those
Yep,
are all.
the cell, yeah, when we do the cell, when we do a cell takedown, that's huge. Those are huge, huge volumes of data.
Exactly. If you would like, I'd be more than happy to have Blakeland reach out to you. She had to drop
Absolutely.
the call, but
Sure.
yeah,
Sure.
right.
Right. Do we have any other questions? If not, we're going to move on to Mr. Yule. Thank you very much, Ms. Carpel.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Hello?
We can hear you.
Oh my, you can?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, good. I want to start up. Okay, I want to thank the members of the committee and the task force for this opportunity as well. I think that the transparency issue that you're bringing up is interesting, and there's a lot of details to it that they're certainly going to getting into the weeds about. As far as from the perspective of a case management software company, we all generally provide the same services. There wasn't anything surprising in that beautiful presentation by Ms. Carpel. We do similar, if not exactly the same functionality. We do it in a lot different process. The process is different, the platform is different, but we both facilitate workflow, help to streamline the process with new development, have the ability with ad hoc reporting tools to filter things in and out, and then standard reports, of course, that can extract any of this data that you'd like. I think that the position we have as a role as a case management system, as far as transparency in the data, is that the data is data, whether it's coming from law enforcement typically or from the courts. No matter what the data is that comes into our database, with the collaboration of the prosecutors, we can create any kind of reporting features and extract that data in any fashion that was very well displayed by Carpel. So I don't want to spend a great deal of time rehashing the same kind of information. But if the prosecutor, we will collaborate with the prosecutor and collect data that's available, whether it's already collected or not. I think MDEC provides a lot of information that we're talking about here. So it's already in the system in our database, and it's just a matter of extracting it. Providing a specific reporting tool to disseminate that is another prospect or project that we would take on. I'm going to just conclude and just say that the role of it, of all our case management software systems, regardless of the brand or the format that they use, it's integral in this component. We're already handling this data, and we're handling mountains more of data than we used to. Like she talked about storage and capacity to retrieve and disseminate information. This is all something that we work together with the prosecutors and provide with the reporting features that they want. So I think we're pretty neutral as far as what transparency rules you want to apply. And another prospect of that would be to create reports that would assess the compliance of these standards. So all of this is a possibility. We don't have any statisticians on board. just like the cop prosecutors don't have them as well. But we would provide all the support, of course, for any kind of reporting features that would inform all these new decisions based on the data that you're extracting, and assess compliance with transparencies. We are obviously, we've been in Maryland for 30 years. We've been in Baltimore for most of those. We're in half the rest of the counties in the state. So we have a vested investment in the state for sure, and in Baltimore specifically, that's where we've had our greatest successes. And that's all I have really. If you have any more questions, I'd be glad to take them.
I do have one. Your software is you said Baltimore City State's Attorney uses it, and is there any other offices that use your system?
Yeah, we're in Frederick. We're in. I have that list in front of me. PG, Baltimore City, of course, Washington. What else?
They're in Howard County as well. We use them.
Thank you.
I don't have the map.
Okay. If you could share that information with us when you have an opportunity, that would be great. Delegate Moon?
That'd be great. Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, it sounds like we have a somewhat audit of at least 2 case management vendors worth of counties covered. But I liked the idea that from one of the prior speakers that we start with a baseline of where the jurisdictions are currently at. I guess my question is a very general one. I'm sort of anticipating a response from smaller counties about the difficulty of putting something like this in. I guess I'm just curious. You've listed a range of county sizes that we've heard. Baltimore to Frederick to Washington, and then in the last round, I think we saw it included Allegheny and Montgomery. But I am curious how these types of solutions scale down to smaller counties, or if a smaller jurisdiction that doesn't currently have this in Maryland wants to do it, are they sort of in for like a full scale implementation, or are there smaller implementations that are possible with these case management systems? I'm just curious, like what our sell would be to these smaller counties. Like, don't worry, we're not going to be, you're not getting yourself into more than you can handle, or is this actually a significant change for even a small county to make?
I would suspect that, I mean, it's not going to be a matter of the size of the county because the data is already in there, and extracting it is not going to be that difficult. And analysis is where the problem is, that we don't have anybody to do that.
Satisfied, delegate? All right, Mr. Gibbs.
I didn't turn my mute off. Forgive me. I'm gonna sort of piggyback off of Delegate Moon's question. So, Mr. Ewell, we use you in Howard County. We use JD in Howard County, but
right.
Let's say I'll use Talbot County as an example. Talbot County currently does not have a case management system. They don't have one. They're trying to get one. They're working on getting one now. So from the ground, I asked Carpel the same question just now, and I'll ask it of you. From the ground up, right? What would it cost to provide JD to Talbot County? Let's say they have, I don't know their exact numbers, but let's say they have, we're at 92, our staff, maybe they're at 25. So they've got 25 staff members. I'm picking that number out of a hat. I'm not actually verified their staff size, but I know they're smaller than we are. Let's say they have 25 staff members. They need to have access to this system. What would it cost for them to take the current paper data that they have, or however they're tracking data, port that into your system and create a JD foundation for case management in Talbot County with 25 users. I'm using that number.
I'm gonna kind of spitball a pricing here that with MDEC integrations and converting that data, I would suggest that we're going to be about $125,000 by the time we get the data converted, we get the users on board, database configured, and they should be alive and then running in 60 days to 90 days, depending on other outside factors. There's also like similar to Carpel, we have a licensing agreement first, and you pay for the licensing, and then there's support on top of that. And there will be support on the MDEC module and any other smaller modules that we also offer. So,
what would that licensing agreement
roughly
be? Yeah, what would the licensing? So just so I have an idea, what would the licensing agreement be?
The licensing agreement is for it's to use the product.
No. I'm talking about what would the cost?
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. What was the cost? Yeah, the cost of the licensing agreement.
$1,000
$1,000 per user or $1,000 total
per license.
per license. User. So per user. So $25,000. Okay, and then what about the data? The data storage.
The storage of the data would be something we can come up with. I don't have a hard number for that. I have to look into that.
Okay.
I wasn't expecting to put a quote together.
Not a quote. Just so the body has an idea of what the costs are when they start talking about implementing programs. They should have an idea as to what the cost would be in each space. Part of running an office is, it's not just the prosecution part; it's also the management of the office part. And so this is the financial part of the job. So what are the approximate cost of the storage of data?
Again, that would vary as far as how much data they need to start with, depending on the size of the initial database and how much space they're going to need for backups. I'm not really prepared to give a hard number, even a hard estimate right now, because there's too many factors.
Okay, thank you,
Mr. Adams.
You're welcome.
Are you still on mute?
You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Sidnor. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
My name is John Adams. I'm the president of JDS. And just to add a little bit to what Tony was talking about, in terms of Maryland, and like you said, we've been engaged in working with the state's attorneys in Maryland for about 30 years now. Baltimore City, Carroll County, Dorchester, Frederick County, Howard County, Washington County, Wycomico County. And it's somebody asked about the size differences. Our system is fully scalable, so it fits. And right there, some of those counties I just named went from small ones right up to the largest in Baltimore City, and probably the second largest in Prince George's County. It's scalable, so it fits any size county. Mr. Johnson mentioned the quality of the data in Baltimore City. We worked very closely with them to handle that, to expand the system and provide different fields, pull downs, et cetera, for whatever data really anybody needs. To Mr. Gibson, our customer in Howard County, what I would suggest is that we'd be more than happy to supply a sort of a pricing list, that would apply kind of a tiered pricing based on an office size. So you'd have a general feel for what it would cost to implement judicial dialogue in whatever size office you needed to in the state. And I think Tony was I don't think Tony was prepared to be given prices here. And I think it was right off the cuff what he was trying to do, because there are some factors that slide on there, in terms of, he mentioned database conversions, the size, or the difficulty of that. Of course, we have tons of experience in that across the United States, not just in Maryland. I think we're in over 150 just different counties around the country, maybe more than that now. Thousands of users use the system every day. You guys talked about dashboards. Of course, certainly that's something that we can work with any jurisdiction in helping them put together. It's just not something we've been asked to do by any of our state's attorneys, district attorneys, county attorneys, et cetera, around the country. But we'd be all for it to help out in any way we can in that regard. As far as data collection, and that the committee is looking to grab, that's the old saying, data in, data out. Whatever data is put in the system can easily be pulled out. So I think Mr. Johnson mentioned, I think in the very first slide he showed relational database. So it's anything can come out of there that the prosecutor's office wanted to pull out of that. So I think from our perspective, speaking from JDS's perspective, we stand ready where we can help out in any way that's needed by whatever our customers ask us to do. We can certainly help them out in terms of whether it's data transparency or reporting, statistics, anything you need, dashboards, whatever. So I just want to let everybody on the committee know that we've been in this game for a long, long time, and whatever's needed, we stand ready to help you out and work with you.
All right, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions from our members? All right, very good. It looks like we're then able to close this meeting. Claire, can you remind me I believe the next meeting or time that we have set up is the 14th? Oh, Ms. Faulkner.
Before we closed out, I did just want to convey my apologies. I received a phone call about a sick family member and everything's okay. But when I saw that call, I had to jump. So I apologize for being absent for just a moment.
Oh, no problem. Ms. Warnken.
Thank you, Senator Sidnor. Before we closed out, I just wanted to raise a point or a question that had been on my mind about our work and whether or not there's anything that we could do to address this. Just noticing, given the membership roster and the nature of our charge as a task force, the omission of representation from the public defender's office, which, given a lot of the practical issues we're discussing, the questions we're wrestling with, it seems like a really invaluable perspective to a lot of this. And I'm wondering if others have thoughts on this, or as co-chairs, you want to speak to this.
Outside of the membership, I guess at this point, I mean, we have who we have. Certainly, any of the appointing members could have appointed anyone. I believe the way the law was laid out, there were some specific people who had to be placed on this particular task force, but I believe outside of that, membership could have been open. Hopefully, I mean, and I do not necessarily disagree, but I mean, we can certainly reach out to our partners with them not necessarily being on this board or this task force. If you and the rest of the membership think it's valuable to have them provide input. Delegate Moon, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
Not in particular. I think you basically covered it. I mean, there's sort of the way the sausage is made in the construction of these task forces. We're sort of, that train has sort of left, but I think there's going to be ample room for pulling in feedback from other stakeholders that didn't land officially on the group before we lock recommendations. And I'll certainly make it a personal point to reach out to OPD before we lock things in, just to get a gut check on things. And I'm sure Senator Sidnor we'll do the same.
As far as the date, Senator Sidnor, the 14th,
Yes.
I'm teaching the judges of the Maryland at the Criminal Law Institute. So that is a date where I would not be available.
Okay. Thank you. So let's see. Was it Wednesday the 15th that we had discussed of the morning, I believe? Was that the other option?
Yeah, the other possibility would be keeping this consistent with 10 a.m. on the 15th.
Are we looking at December or November? Because we're in November now.
We're talking November.
I'm
November.
sorry. I thought you went to next month. I apologize. The 14th of November, I am available. That's a Tuesday.
How's everyone else look?
That looks good for me as well.
All right. There, then we'll set it for, let's see. And is this time fine, or is it somebody who? All right. Then we'll look to do it again on the 14th.
I'm sorry, I did previously express that I wasn't available at 10 a.m. on the 14th.
Right.
Do after 12, but
I got a note that that you weren't, but you were available at 1.
Correct.
All right. Does 1 o'clock look all right for everyone on the 14th? All right. Okay. It look like we're set. I thank everyone for their time today and their comments and participation, and we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Have a blessed day.